This war is real. Fighting is everything. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Tempt not the righteous man to draw his sword. Conviction, righteousness, ruthlessness. To understand tolerance, you have to understand the line of intolerance. War is the teacher, soldiers are the students. They become the bards of war. There are men that define the times in which we live, and one of those is General Flynn. What he and his family have gone through in the last 4 years will be written in our histories, both as a stain on our nation and our government, and equally as a story of a patriot who persevered. General Flynn has listed Isaiah 6:8 at the top of his Twitter page, and I think that speaks deeply to who he is. It reads, "And I hear the voice of the Lord saying, Whom shall I send, and who will go for us? Then I said, Here I am, send me." And perhaps even more to the point of General Flynn's character are the words of Thomas Paine. "These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the summer patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from the service of their country. But he that stands it now deserves the love and thanks of man and woman. Tyranny like hell is not easily conquered, yet we have the consolation with us that the harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. What we obtain too cheap, we esteem too lightly. It is dearness only that gives everything its value. Heaven knows how to put a proper price upon the goods, and it would be strange indeed if so celestial an article as freedom should not be highly rated." When we say the words American and when we say the words patriot, we speak of General Flynn. Welcome to the BardsFM podcast. My name is Scott Kesterson. I am the director and producer of the war documentary, Bards of War, Fighting is Everything. And you are listening to episode 153, A Conversation with General Flynn. Sir, I really want to thank you this morning for coming on the show. It's a great honor, and I know Patriots are excited to hear what you have to say. But with all the topics that we have to cover, I'd like to just begin this morning with just an update on how you're doing, especially after the 4 years you endured with this fight with the deep state.
First, thank you, Scott, for having me on and allowing me some time to just have a conversation with you. And I really appreciate your show and your message. So it has not sunk in yet. Honestly, it's been that dramatic of an outcome. And so for my family and I, what we have endured, and as the White House statement said, as our family statement has said, my personal statement has said, no one in our country should ever have to be put through anything that I was put through. And certainly when I say I, really, it's my entire family and frankly, the country. And I would just say to you, Scott, that over the last few years, I've learned a lot about my faith. I think you and I have been in other conversations about faith in general. And I'm not one to wear my faith on my sleeve. I'm just not. I'm not going to, profess to people. I'm not going to tell people what they need to believe or how they need to believe. But I do believe. I was raised in a faithful family atmosphere and with strong values and principles. So anyway, and I learned a lot about my family. My family, as we say, fight like a Flynn. But I also have an extended family. My wife is also one of 7 children, and her family is very tight knit. They're from a Portuguese community up in the southeastern New England area, which has a large church membership. They're a great family. So I've learned a lot about family and how family binds together, because that's probably one of the strengths that we have, frankly, for me. And I think within our country that family still matters. And then the last thing that I have definitely learned about are friendships. And I call them true friendships. Friendships from people that I've never met that all of a sudden came into my life, and they poured their generosity and graciousness into our lives. And I would also say people that I did know throughout my military career and throughout my childhood up till now, who stuck with me because they knew who I was. They know me. They've actually met me, and they've talked to me, and they work with me. And very many people in the military. I mean, probably a single point of pride that I have is the number of non-commissioned officers and sergeants majors, first sergeants, platoon sergeants, guys that work with me and got out as corporals or young buck sergeants, they have stuck with me because those people know who your true character are. And there's other quote unquote friendships that I've lost, and I've lost because they don't have shared values, I guess. I think it's a shame because they've shown in the times of crises their true colors. And so faith, family, and friendships. And that's why my message in my letter that I published, and I'd ask you if you don't mind to publish it, on your website. And I talk about that because those are the things that became important in the last couple of years. And that's what I'm trying to allow to sink in. I do not want to forget that. That's what's important in my life.
So this has been quite a trial for yourself, obviously, and now we're looking at one of the greatest trials in our nation's history, and quite frankly, what looks very much like a second American Revolution. You and I have had a lot of discussions between each other this last year on the color revolution, the threat to the Republic, and now we're facing one of the most probably deceitful things we've discovered, which is our vote. Can you speak a little bit to where we are and what this means contextually in our history?
So I think that people across the country, definitely around the world, are seeing something happening to the United States of America that they never felt would ever happen. And that is this, in our election process, particularly a presidential election, would ever happen in the disastrous way that this election occurred. And there are clear, when the media, the mainstream media go, there's no evidence, there's all this nonsense. When patriots come forward with courage and determination, and from all walks of life, from Democrats to Republicans that have witnessed activity or behavior that is highly inappropriate, I won't say criminal because I'm not witnessing it. They don't understand what a criminal act is versus just a corrupt act versus just something that's inappropriate. So I would just say this, there are affidavits, though, hundreds and hundreds of affidavits that are signed by hundreds and hundreds of people across the American landscape that have witnessed some type of egregious, inappropriate action or behavior, and that these people are under the penalty of perjury, that they are signing these documents saying, I saw this happen. There's videos along with those affidavits. There's photos along with those affidavits. We know of activity after judges have ordered to stop certain things, like to stop touching machines, for example, where people walked in and touched the machines, and those things have been reported. So I don't think that the American public, I actually don't think that a lot of Americans can really understand how bad this is, but I know that they feel it. I know that they feel it. I know that the sentiment around this country is something bad happened. We do not accept it, and we want to see the process play out before we anoint somebody in our country to lead our country. And I think everybody knows that the previous discussion about we're going to fundamentally change our country, right? So those kinds of statements, those type of actions, where you say to yourself, is this part of their means to fundamentally change the nature of our country, to shift our country from a constitutional republic with sort of a capitalism as one of its roots, I guess, to a socialist country, to more of a country of socialism where, and I would just say in general, the haves and the have-nots, and there's a reliance on big government, right? And big government will tell you what you're going to do and how you're going to do it, how you're going to behave. When we have, for real, we have avowed Marxists, certainly avowed socialists that are now in the U.S. House of Representatives, that are in the Senate, and potentially more to come if some of these elections aren't relooked, then that's a problem. That means that there is a creeping into our system, into our culture, and it didn't happen because of Donald Trump. It happened over the last couple of decades, and I could even go back and maybe another time, Scott, we'll have a conversation about the last 100 years history in big chunks and walk through how that happened. But when I talk about Donald Trump, President Trump, he is a consequence of this shift going on in our country, and the American public felt it. They felt it. And so they said, we're tired of the class of people that we have because we don't trust them anymore. And that's been pretty clear about a lot of things in terms of accountability. My situation is a great example. of people losing trust in certain institutions. So Donald Trump is a consequence in the history of this country. And I don't want me to be facetious about this, but Donald Trump is really a speed bump. And so let's say he's able to stay another 4 years, which I believe will be the eventual outcome. Then he's a speed bump in the history of the growth of the United States of America. So he's going to slow us down like a speed bump on a road. It slows the car down a little bit instead of speeding towards something, right? So Donald Trump is this strategic speed bump in the history of the country. And thank God that the American people felt that way. And it has slowed down this fundamental change of our country. And it is now allowing patriots to reflect on what is happening and to awaken to this advent of the idea that our country could become a socialist country over time, as President Trump stated way back when in a State of the Union address, and I don't know when, it was a couple of years ago, maybe a year and a half ago, in a State of the Union address to not only the United States House and Senate, but also to the United States of America and to the world. He said, America will never be a socialist country. Well, I mean, so here we are. We are on the brink of moving into another phase, if you will, of our system that could basically change us toward that. And so I think that he has a lot of decisions that I think he needs to consider and think about. People are going to say, well, he should concede. Why should he concede? In 2000, the Bush-Gore process, it took 37 days. It was for one county. We're talking about hundreds and hundreds of counties, at least 6 states. We now know we have 2 other states that are starting to complain, and that's Wisconsin and New Mexico. What I heard last night was Virginia may jump into the mix here to say, hey, we think we have a fraudulent election here based on the things that they're seeing. Because sometimes when a crime happens and somebody tries to steal something in the middle of the night from your house, you haven't been in that drawer in a long time. You go into the drawer and you go, hey, somebody took my money. Now you start to go, well, when were we here? When was the last time I opened that drawer? It was a couple of days ago. Well, people are starting to see because brave patriots are coming forward and allowing America to actually hear what happened in their respective areas. And other Americans are going, whoa, wait a second. Is this for real? We need to slow down here and make sure that we get this right. Because if we don't get this right, then my sense is that we are looking at a fundamental shift in our country.
So one of the biggest challenges we face across the nation is essentially establishing truth. Our media, you referred to back, I believe in 2018, your reference was they did a disservice. Where we are right now is a media that is completely turned and is trying to dictate an election outside of the legal process. And we've stepped beyond a boundary that we've never seen before. Where do we go here, and where does that digital army fit in as well?
Good question. And this, to me, is an example. So the digital soldiers, who I speak about sometimes, we're in a new era where you have physical and you have informational. And so before you go physical, you prepare the environment. And I'm now sort of talking philosophically and theoretically about warfare, I guess. In many of the training events that I've been through, and certainly in the real wars I've been involved in, we have something called a road to war. And for anybody that's listening that's done any training exercises, they always start to prepare. You go into a week-long or a month-long training exercise, but prior, they start to feed you information, and we used to call it the road to war. And the road to war would be a series of things that happen. And most of those series of things that happen, there might be some physical action that occurs. A bomb goes off in a building or somebody gets assassinated over here. But a lot of it is informational stuff. A lot of it is preparation and of the sort of the informational domain of the battlefield that you are about to enter physically. And so I think that it's really important that people understand that the level of deception, the level of misinformation, the level of sort of look here when I'm actually over here, but I'm going to give you enough to look here and I'm going to capture your attention. It's the head fake. One way in a basketball game where I get you to move to your left and I move the opposite direction and I go around you. So, indirect. And information, and in the informational domain and information warfare is clearly, initially, is an indirect approach And then all of a sudden you have the direct approach that just begins to bombard. So they decide they have seeded the battlefield informationally with enough of what they want their message to be. And then they just bombard with the repetition of the message. And every single mainstream medium, every single sort of the left, if you will, and the social media, the Twitters, the Facebooks, all of those big names, all the names that your audience is familiar with, they start to repeat constantly that, nothing to see here, let's move on, right? In a big way. So that's not good. It's not healthy for a free and fair society that respects and has the incredible privilege of having the freedom to speak. So we want to have free and open debates. We want to have the ability to share information. So that is sort of the foundation. The next level is really what we're seeing. So now we're in the place where it's frontal informational attack. So the President of the United States is being censored. The President of the United States is being censored. Two other examples, two hearings that have recently occurred that maybe people paid attention to or certainly should have heard about. Pennsylvania, and yesterday was Arizona. And I watched pieces of both of them just as an American, because I'm interested. I want to know what's going on. So the gentleman, Mastriano, as I think his name is, Mastriano, he's a retired colonel. He's a state senator from Pennsylvania. At the end of their hearing in Pennsylvania, I think it was a week ago, he gave a great summary, and I kind of call it a sort of a mom and apple pie type summary of what they heard that day. And essentially the summary was, this is America. So right after he gave that summary, Twitter went ahead and basically took him offline, took his personal Twitter account offline. They left his government account online, but so you can continue to go to see it. And I'm sure that there's probably those little banners underneath that say, this is fraudulent information. But they took this personal account offline. Second example, yesterday during the witness hearings in Arizona, there was a very passionate witness who talked about accountability in the business world, accountability in the political world. And it's like night and day. Business world, you do something wrong, you get fired. You pay fines. In the political world, you do something wrong, nobody's held accountable. And he was very passionate about it. And he was very clear about what he witnessed and what in his part to help Mayor Giuliani and his team to present a very strong case. Twitter removed him immediately. They dropped him right off. And I don't remember the guy's name, but it is floating around. His clip is floating around the internet. But they banned him. They took him offline. That, to me, is very, very dangerous. And I think that the social media world has been given a privilege, and they probably were slick in how they avoided this, whatever I don't get the number right, Section 230 or whatever the number is, that was complained about in these recent hearings, that they basically get around it through this congressional component of how they're able to operate. That is something that we cannot have in this country. So they're part of the problem. The other thing is funding. How are these organizations, which are very, very powerful organizations, and they're very well funded? I mean, these people are making a lot of money. Where are they placing those dollars? Who are they helping? I mean, I understand that, I think it's in Michigan, I believe, where the CEO of Facebook, I think the number that I was told was like he dropped $350 to $400 million in one state. Why? It's in Michigan, I believe. Why? Where did that money go? What was it used for? And, there's some evidence that people are coming back with that is very telling. And some of the stuff that I've seen, again, I'm paying attention to the information battlefield. So all that said, Scott, the difficulty for us as digital soldiers is it's like if you come into my backyard and you fight me in my neighborhood where I grew up, I'm probably going to be able to outsmart you because I know the terrain. We don't typically go in the Army, in our military, we don't typically fight in our backyard. Where we typically fight is we're directed and ordered to go overseas, right? We send the armies, our military forces overseas. So we go to Afghanistan, Central America, Korea, Iraq, wherever the fight is that our political leaders send us. And so we've been sent overseas. So we're fighting on the enemy's terrain, so to speak, because that's where they live. So what you have to look at the information battlefield is, in a way, it's sort of the adversary. In this case, it's really adversarial because when you're censoring the President of the United States, that's an adversarial act to me. But this is their terrain. So until that changes, until there's new procedures or enactments or whatever, until that changes, we have to operate on this terrain. Again, it's the modern day version of the public square. It's the town crier in 1775 that would come out and with one piece of paper that they just, wrote down or they heard from, or somebody rode a horse through and handed out a piece of paper and said, here's what's happening. And he rode to the next town and he said, here's what's happening. And the town crier would go out and say, hear ye, or whatever, and they would yell, proclaim whatever the message was to the square, and they would listen, and then they would do something about it or not. That was sort of how things happened 40 years ago in this country. That's kind of where we are today. I think that people need to reflect on that, because we, the people, we cannot give up our rights, our privileges, because all you got to do is go to a national, memorial battlefield or a grave site. Like we were talking about Gettysburg the other day, where I understand that there's more dead voters in Pennsylvania than soldiers buried on the hallowed grounds of the Gettysburg battlefield. I mean, that's a pretty stark statement. And I hope that that's not true. But if it is true, then Pennsylvania needs to really reflect on that and say that those sacrifices, those people that sacrificed their lives there or elsewhere around the world, soldiers from this country that sacrificed their lives, they don't totally always understand why they're doing it other than for their buddy on their left or right, but they inherently or intuitively know that they're sacrificing it for our freedom. And one of our freedoms is a free and fair election.
Sir Thomas Paine wrote, "The slavery of fear had men afraid to think." And right now, in this very fluid environment that we're in with the media and this information space, one of the things we're also seeing is emerging threats that are coming, if you will, from the flanks. One of those is the vaccine push. There's a lot of push for the Great Reset. And it's difficult, I think, for many to keep focused on the primary fight and also be able to shift, if you will, shift fire towards the flanking fight. What do you have to say on those topics, and how can you kind of guide those digital soldiers out here that are very new to war?
You can't sit and say, I didn't know. There's too many ways to educate yourself. And I would just say that in this particular issue that you just raised, this whole COVID situation, and then the consequences of what people are talking about and what we are experiencing and living, lock-ins, shut-ins, vaccines, all this sort of business. You cannot accept responsibility for something if you don't go and understand it yourself. That's the ability to be able to still get information. And you can find information in places that you need to find it, studies or articles or discussions that you have with people that you trust. But be very careful about what you, as I said before, this repetition of really information that may not be true. So you have to go seek the truth, and you have to use your God-given intuition, your God-given judgment, and your gut feel. When I say intuition, it's really your gut feel on what is right or what is wrong. The old thing about you learn in the military, if it looks like a duck, sounds like a duck, it's a duck. So what is this? And what are we talking about here? And so you cannot allow yourself to walk into some situation. It happens. I know it happens. It happened to me. But now, if we learn, and we can learn from each other, and people, your audience and whoever listens to this needs to learn that you have responsibility for your actions, for your life, and your decisions. So become informed. Become an informed citizen. And if you get up one of these days and you say, geez, I don't know who to believe. I felt that. I go back to what I said, my faith, my family, and my really true friends who, in my case, have stuck with me really from the time, that I was a child, who are still strong in my camp. You've got to go and find that information. You've got to fight for that information. And you've got to demand it. We have these political people in our country because they were voted in. They were voted for. Now, what we're finding is maybe some of these elections were all rigged. Who knows? But I don't want to go there yet. But there's some appearance of that, and there's certainly fraud cases that already were resolved in years past, where people are in jail because of their fraudulent elections. But my point is, we still vote for people. So if you don't like somebody, you can't say, well, I didn't vote. I don't vote. You got to go vote. And you got to exercise that for now. As long as we still have that right. Now, that right might not mean anything going forward. But, my point is be informed. Fight for information. Don't allow yourself to sit there and go, well, I didn't know. Well, why didn't you know? You have every opportunity to know. You can go know it through your friends. If you don't want to get on the work in the world of the digital information battlefield that we're on, it's just, I don't want people to sit there like a bump on a log and go, I just didn't know. I don't know. I know in my military career, I've had every shot you can imagine. I've had every vaccine you can imagine. And I've stayed healthy since I've gotten out. In the military, you get the flu vaccine every year because you had to. And, for a week and a half, you'd be sick as a dog. Thank God I've been able to stay healthy. I don't get the flu vaccine because, frankly, every time I got it when I was in the military, I get sick. I haven't gotten it. Now, if I'm ordered to get it, I know what I won't be. I won't be misinformed. So, but I haven't gotten it. I haven't gotten the flu vaccine for years because, frankly, I'm not ordered to do it anymore. And so far, by the grace of God, I've been able to maintain my health. I haven't had the flu. I get a head cold here and there, but I fight through it. So that's sort of my personal situation. But really, the bigger issue is be informed about what is happening because it's happening, folks.
So just kind of some last thoughts, what you would say to the digital army as we face a very critical window in our country's history for the next approximately 6 weeks and then beyond.
We're in a crucible of U.S. history, this moment in time that we are in right now. It is a crucible. And what I do believe is that there are multiple paths to victory. And what we have to do as people, we the people, particularly in these challenged areas, these challenged states, because I know that there's a lot of people that are really upset. I mean, really, really upset. And I don't believe that they're going to stand for it. But there are paths to victory. So the positive in my message, and I hope that my message is one of to try to educate and make people understand, but the positive message is there are paths to victory. I mean, I can rattle off 4 that include a place where at the end, Donald J. Trump is the president. And they're not difficult paths. Path 1 is Georgia, Michigan, Arizona. Path 2, Georgia, Michigan, Wisconsin. Path 3, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada. Path 4, Michigan, Arizona, Wisconsin. The 4th path brings us to 269 votes. And then that goes to Congress constitutionally, and every state gets 1 vote. And because we have legislatures that are more Republican than Democrat, Donald Trump wins at 269. But we shouldn't even be there. And I didn't mention Pennsylvania because Donald Trump probably got 350 electoral votes legitimately. But now we're going through this process. And here we have being shoved down our throats by the media that this guy, in this case, Vice President Biden, is the victor, and he's picking his staff, and he's doing this, and he's doing that. The president of the United States hasn't conceded. We have legal actions in at least 6 states. There's probably more, but at least 6 legal actions. And those are happening, and we're still not at the 37-day mark of the Bush-Gore example, which was only 1 county that they were griping about. And here we have hundreds of counties, multiple states, and we're still in the process of legal actions, a legal constitutional process. People need to take a deep breath, understand that there are paths to victory. I believe Donald J. Trump is going to be the president, and we're going to have another period of time in our country where the American public, the American patriots out there are going to have to stay awake and stay up and, and push on their system, on our system to correct itself. Otherwise, we go the way of other nation states in the history of the world that are no longer with us, right? There's a lot of countries, a lot of nations that have disappeared. They're just no longer there. How much longer can we exist as the greatest world power, greatest superpower on the planet, greatest country ever in the history of the world? How long can we exist? Well, I think that's the question that I struggle with, because I know that things do come to an end, but I still have children, I still have grandchildren, and I know what type of country I want them to live in. So, Scott, that's my sort of closing comment.
Those are fantastic, sir, and thank you. Sir, typically we close with a prayer, and I'm going to ask if you don't mind leading a prayer for the nation on this moment.
Wow. But definitely a prayer of thanks. I mean, I think that as we go forward, praying is probably one of the greatest things that we could do. So I think for you, for me, for my family, for your listeners, there's probably a pain that everybody feels, and we're recovering, or we're trying to recover from a pain that our nation is experiencing, and it's heavy. We feel a burden. We feel that there's sort of the nation is in a place where there's a falling spirit. And so we can recover from this pain. And some of the things that I've said during this conversation, and some days people wake up and they're disappointed, and it just seems like just things aren't going your way and our way and the way of what we believe in terms of our values, our Judeo-Christian values. And we look at fragments of our life, and if we gather those fragments of our life and we give them to the Lord, then I think that people will be renewed. I mean, I think if there's one thing, and I do this, I'm telling this, your public audience, but I try to do this in my own silent way, in my own solemn way, is I try to go someplace quiet and pray. And, because I'm imperfect, right? We're all imperfect. And one thing I would say to everybody is, don't ever say, I just cannot go on. Instead say, I can do whatever I need to do through Christ. I will never quit. I will never quit, because God is on my side. So God bless you, Scott, and thank you for allowing me this time.
Thank you, sir, and God bless you, and I wish you the best for your family and this fantastic freedom you finally reclaimed.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.